In this memo, we do have some Keter monies, Trindle return funds. There's money to be moved from tobacco settlement for economic development and some for the general fund. There's money being transferred to the fair for fair operations from the general fund. And then just some of the things that we've talked about at the budget committee before, family resource centers, and what came to the board for the Lassen County Chamber in the last week or 2 weeks, and money for the food bank. There's several budgets that had reductions in staff, and you'll see those when you go through in department areas, but there have been some that have increased. And I've listed some of those out. I do have specific, if you want specifics on what those position titles are, I'd be happy to address that. In the interest of time, let me know if you would like me to do that. I do have one page that will, well, the $77,000 is under revenues, on page 3, and that's the money for the Williamson Act. So that's on page 3 in the middle of the page. If you want to line that out and make it 0, we will be looking to try to make, come into balance and then work on what Richard's talked about with the money for the coordination efforts. So it's a work in progress. So procedurally, oh, and then one other thing. I accidentally or inadvertently, when we were putting this together, put the geothermal tab under the geothermal budget, which is Fund 174, their numeric order in the tabs. So in Fund 10, or in tab 10, Fund 174 geothermal should actually be moved to tab 7 under the planning and building department. I just put that in the wrong section. So if you want to pull out of section 10, Fund 174 geothermal, and slip that into section 7 for when we come back for the public hearings. So procedurally, it's posted in the paper. We'll be making changes within the next 2 weeks, and it's available for the public. And if we'll come back at 9:15 on August 4th. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have. Anything else, Richard?
Just that if you want us to put dollar signs in front of everything, next week Regina's going to kill us all.
That's true. We won't be able to read it if we keep adding stuff.
Maybe, yeah. Julie, thanks. Yeah, it's a heck of a lot of work.
You're welcome.
My goodness, yes. I'm happy I was able to be part of the budget committee process this year with very good experience, and it gave me a lot more insight to the workings, and it's not an easy task. And to you as well, Richard, you guys.
Thank you.
Hats off to you guys for this. I think, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Gary,
first.
One question, did we get the assessments for the water master, are those pulled out and segregated out, or are we gonna go see that later, or what?
I might let Bob address that. For this coming year, those assessments will be presented to the auditor before the 10th of August. And that's essentially when the county process begins, but I don't know if Bob wants to.
You mean the apportionments?
Yes.
The apportionments have not been approved by that board yet, as I'm told. I don't know if they intend to address it by then or not. I don't know that it's necessarily part of this budget per se.
No, it doesn't. It wouldn't be a part of this budget.
Okay.
As a view, it's a totally separate issue.
Okay.
I just have 2 questions. First one, Julie, relates to the fair, providing funding for the fair from the general fund in the amount of $69,10, which is a reduction from 84,000 or something, I assume. And I think based on what I read in the memo is that they've received some additional revenue, which necessitated the fact that we could do that. But last week I happened to have an interesting conversation with Mr. Walcott, and there was one that wasn't pertaining to this at first, but it led to this when I was looking at the budget. I had attended the city council meeting a couple weeks before, in which the issue of funding for the fireworks was on their agenda, and they were being requested to contribute, I believe it was $2,500 towards that program. For the last 40 years, the city and the county have been the sponsors of the fireworks display every year there July 4th. And it was designed to try to encourage people to not use personal fireworks to do that. And over time, the amount of funding or subsidy from the city and the county would not keep up with what the cost is to put on the show. So at that time, Mr. Walcott, or before that even, probably Mr. Neely or previous fair manager started augmenting the city and county support for that. And at that time, we were all, both agencies were contributing $5,000. And so the private sector was adding to that. They go get sponsorships, and it could be a distributor, whatever it may be. And they raise a few $1,000s to augment. I think Diamond Mountain Casino has been a big supporter of the fireworks in region. It's not like they pay for the whole thing, but they contribute towards it. But Mr. Walcott, when I was telling him about how the city was kind of questioning their particular role, but they ultimately went ahead and provided that support, when I was sharing that with him, he said that the county, when we started backfilling for the state, lack of state funding, that all that support got lumped together. And so there isn't, and I was able to see it in there, where there has not been a direct line item of support for the fireworks. The fireworks has nothing to do with the operation of the fairs. It has to do with providing that as a program that was a service that was being offered year to year. And the fact it's being lumped in with, and then partly consolidated and now reduced. So based on that, the county hasn't been contributing to the fireworks for the last couple, 2-3 years. And apparently that was a budgetary decision that was made at a staff level. He didn't really have any choice but to accept it. It was never something that was brought to the board to discuss. So I would like to see us, I know the city's putting in $2,500 now, so they're down from their $5,000. That we have as, in addition to whatever support we give for operations of the fair, an allocation, maybe $2,500 to support the fireworks as a total separate activity. That has nothing to do with fair operations. Because he indicated to me that this year, the amount of money he had to work with, put on the fireworks, it was like $10,000, $12,000, $14,000. I think he only had $7,000 or $8,000 to deal with. And I know the uptown Christmas fireworks that go on every year, which is only about a $4,000 or $5,000 purchase. So the amount of fireworks we're getting nowadays for what the dollar can buy is a lot less. So I'm afraid that that program is going to suffer, which really works against why we want to get people to come to the fairgrounds and do the fireworks there as a community thing rather than everybody doing their own separate thing with the personal fireworks.
If I could just respond to how my thoughts on what we're doing, we're funding that $69,000 has fluctuated. It was higher, then he got some additional revenues. Jim's been very proactive about working with
He
me.
had no problem with that.
If he has budgeted the fireworks in his budget, effectively you are funding it because we give him whatever it takes to make him zero. At this point, that's what the general fund is contributing. So if he's budgeted all the fireworks, we are making him whole. So the $69,000 is just to keep him from projecting to end in the red. If that addresses, and that's kind of, rather than have two pieces going out, we just said, okay, budget what you need, and this board has decided to fund him the last couple of years.
As long as it's recognized that we're contributing funding towards that. And I don't want to see, by doing it this way, where you don't have it as a dedicated set aside, at some point in time, if he's faced with having to make, his fair operations, and it's a question, do we do fireworks or having the extra help or whatever it is he has to pay for, an increase in this bill or that bill, the fireworks can find itself out in the cold. And so to me, I don't think it's something that should be part of the operations of the fair itself. And I recommended to him that those things should be separate. That was just my personal opinion, because I know how it works, how it can lead to it.
I believe that the funds are expended and budgeted through the fair budget.
It is.
So to that extent, they're in the same fund, so.
It is in the same funds, but I think it should be, when the funds are transferred for him to spend, I think we should earmark part of that $69,000, or whatever the dollar amount is that becomes the necessary amount, would specifically earmark it as being contributions to support the fireworks as a standalone, because that's what the city is looking at too. So anyway, it's a matter of semantics, but I can see, it is, but I can see the way we're doing it can lead to the ultimate demise of our, having that as a priority as a contribution. And I think that's something that we made as a commitment as a county years ago and have sustained all these years. And I just don't want to see it lost in the shuffle because it's so easy to happen. I realize $2,500 out of $104 million is probably nothing. The other issue, the question I had, and that was curious as to what the nexus was of using tobacco settlement funds to backfill and reduce the deficit for the economic development fund that you were talking about, because tobacco settlement is supposed to be used theoretically for health-related type activities, and, you know.
Well, I can address that. The nexus was simply out of necessity. And the fact is that tobacco revenue is, notwithstanding rhetoric and
It's a general
historical
fund.
custom, it is a revenue, is a general revenue to the county based on a settlement for expenses that were incurred long, long ago. And so to that extent, they are a general revenue. They're not, I know a lot of people have made the argument that they should be used for health services, or there should be connection, but there's no legal requirement or
No, I'm not saying there is a
But-
legal requirement, but this is the first time I've seen those funds. I mean, we use
Wow.
it to fund the family resource centers, and we use it to fund, the post-employment retirement
Mhm.
health benefits for the retirees. We used it to fund things that had a nexus to a health-related type activity, and this is the first time we've actually not done that, and I was just curious what was the factor that drove that, other than the fact that the general fund needs the money, and let's just take the money and use it for the general
Sure,
fund.
yes, it was just purely, the nexus is that there was an indicated priority to continue that program, and that's a allowable
I guess you
funding.
can make it a health-related activity by saying we're trying to promote the fiscal health of the community, so you can have a good conscience there. If
My
sus-
conscience was fine.
If sustaining the bureaucracy is a health-related activity, then that's what you're covering. You answered my question.
I'm just happy that the 200,000 a year that's earmarked for the swimming pools.
Well, I could see if you use this as a rationale that we can just rip it off and use it for whatever we decide to use it for, then that rationale, you have, just like the fireworks down the road, I guarantee you, Mr. Chairman, they'll have a rationale and they'll rip it off for something else. And I think the board should be on guard for that, and believe me, we will be speaking to that.
We all need a cheat sheet here with what to,
But I appreciate this page here because it shows at least a breakdown of those fund balances that make up that 26 or 20, whatever, that close to 30 million. Probably by this time next year, we'll be up to 30, 35 million if we're able to go.
That was the page I was gonna refer you to, because
Yeah, no,
that does address what you're looking for. and-
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we did our best to get that in there. It's,
That
the
was
books
the
aren't
first page I
completely
zeroed
closed, but
into, and I love this. This is what I've been asking for, so
Good.
thank you. So when people tell me where's the extra 8 or 10 or $15 million, I have something to show them. Thank you. And now it's actually up to 26 million.
and the,
Actually, down here, it shows 29 million when you look at it on all across the board, so.
If I could just make one.
So don't tell me I'm wrong.
Included in those beginning balance, some of that is just simply project money, particularly the roads. So we have the money and the project is
Yeah,
gonna be.
and that's broken down here. It's clearly broken down. It's not all ready to go spend on your pet project.
it does include the Trindle funds in the very top
Sure it
too.
does.
So,
thanks, John, for that.
just one more note, we will be talking, and the board will be asked, and the public hearing has been posted for Honey Lake TV for August 4th at 9 a.m.
Okay,
So,
and then,
the same
and
day.
then following that, we, budget.
at 9:15.
How long are we gonna be in budget session? What's the plan?
5 minutes.
I don't wanna know. Do I need to book the day, or do I need to book the week? What do I need to book?
I'm guessing, but I would say half a day at least.
Depends on how angry you are.
I'm not angry. I'm just engaged.
So,
And I realize that Mrs. Spencer doesn't want to hear a word about it, but that's fine. I'll talk just because I know it annoys her.
I've actually enjoyed your dissertation.
So, is
Well,
that,
I'll read about it on your website and you'll tell me
No,
how
you
terrible it was, but that's
No,
okay.
you won't.
that's okay.
You come in here, say nice things, and then you go and say all the bad things, so it works. It's all good. I love you too.
Are
I
we
love
gonna-
you too, Jim,
let's keep
especially
it,
the letters you sent me.
All right. thank
Letters I
you.
send you?
Okay, hang
Well,
on now.
talk to you.
So, on the 4th, we're also gonna have the discussion about the.
Cost allocation plan.
and all that.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a long meeting.
Yeah, the cost allocation, but that's when we need to have that. Appreciate it.
We're gonna, Jim wants to discuss the cost allocation and stuff.
But the auditor is fixing it. It's not as bad as it used to be.
Alrighty then, so, before we go to the public, comment, is there any other, comments from the board? Anything to say? No? Tom, you got any comments or?
We'll see August 4th.
Okay, so, all right, we'll turn it over to the public comment on the item. Eileen, thank you for your patience.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have all the patience in the world.
Okay.
I just want to make 2 comments. This board can bend the rules, but I caution you, you are getting close to breaking the rules. Cami Alvis prepared 9 pages of questions concerning your budget. We'll hold that off until the 4th for the first budget hearing. Private lateral transfers are always questioned in the private sector, even more so with public money. And this budget is loaded with lateral transfers. And those are going to be County Health's focus on the budget hearings. I have a lot of concern, a lot of people have concerns in our group with this budget and what I'm sure you're going to do, but we are also going to make it very public this year. Last year, we did a forensic study on which was done by a professional, and so we know where to look this year. We know what questions to ask you, and so before Mr. Wazik breaks out into one of his snarky comments, I should have left before Mr. Chapman started talking, so thank you.
All right. Jennifer, before we close, I think it'd be nice, I mean, not, the full board isn't probably aware of some of the contributions, you've made, if maybe you could enlighten everybody. Last year, not intentionally, but your thing, the juvenile hall kind of got I don't know, beat up on a bit, for lack of a better word, but, it's definitely something that the county seems to provide, but you've managed to cut a lot of money, cost-wise out of there, and has gotten the average daily cost per kid in their rate down in line, with, and actually less than a lot of the other counties, so you did a really great job. So maybe you could kind of touch on some of the cost savings that you brought forward, to the party.
I think the total amount of cost savings that we brought was $173,000, right around there. And what we did was, I contacted the Board of State and Community Corrections, and I worked with County Counsel's office to look at all of the regulations within Title 15 regarding staffing. And we received confirmation from the Board of State and Community Corrections that the way we have our staffing patterns, if we have a superintendent, a supervisor, and 1 floor staff there for every 10 kids, we just have to make sure that out of those 3 staff, 1 of those are male and 1 of those are female, so that it took the gender specifics out of a lot of that. So we were able to take and utilize a half-time position, bring that into probation, a 3/4 time position, and bring that into probation to fill some of the positions that are there, and then to agree to leave vacant 2 other positions. So we reduced it by 3.25 positions, And the average daily cost for 10 kids or for 10 beds is going to be $297. And the average cost for 8 kids would bring it to $372, which is cheaper than it was in 2011 when the study went out.
Very good. And I mean, whether you have your own juvenile hall or have to send the kids out, there's definitely a cost, an average daily cost. And those costs there, I'm confident, are significantly less than if we were shipping kids, based on the studies that we did last year. And even when you compare those average daily costs to other counties, they're well in line, considerably less than some of the others. So I just wanted to recognize you for your efforts. And
Thank you, I appreciate that.
be always up here again from the other side. So thank you.
I have thick skin, so I think maybe that makes it a little easier. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, I think she's doing a great job.
Thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Alrighty, so is there any other public comment? I think the board, public, with the exception of Gene right out of the building, you're the lone public member. Okay, then we'll move off there, and I think that was just information. Is there any no vote or any of this? Yeah. Okay, I think that we're just left with item H9.
That's me, okay. Like 3 quick things, Mr. Chairman. There's a group in Plumas County who has invited you to attend a meeting either in person or on the telephone, and it's a group that called 2,000 Lives. It's connected with Plumas County, and it's a 211 project, which is a kind of a consortium of trying to get various services put together. It's put together by the United Way, I understand. I've got a flyer on it. If one or more of you would like to attend, it's July 29th at noon, Plumas Sierra County Fairgrounds. And I'll just pass that around. If nobody wants to go, there is a call number as well. 20,000.
I was thrown off without $1.
Also, I have a note. I have a note that the ambulance resolution, the Southern Cascade resolution, was passed in Modoc County this morning.
Oh, good.
The only other item I have is I will be out of the county from July 25th through the 30th, and Melody Brawley has volunteered to be acting CAO in my absence, so I'll be sending out her contact information. Was that a liberal use of the term volunteer?
And as an aside, I am out of the state for that August 4th meeting date, special meeting date. And I've made arrangement that Ms. Skeen, Deputy County Council, will attend. This is something that existed long before our contractual relationship existed, and something I think
I would have thought that after 16 years as a department head, you would have learned that you do want to be out of the room on President's Day.
Well, I think that's true, but I've got a fishing trip with my 90-year-old dad, or being out of the room at budget time,
And I'll look out for it.
And we'll add a dollar sign to it, we'll just take 90,000 out of the budget. Give it to Jennifer.
Thank you.
Ms. Skeen will be in attendance, and she'll be well prepared, sir.
And we will be working with dollar signs and Jennifer will take all your contributions.
Can you just, before we adjourn, can you just fill in the board on the meeting with the CHP and the road?
Oh, we have a meeting scheduled, I'm double checking here, but I believe on the 7th, yes, with the CHP to discuss the road designations on the forest property, particularly the Lassen. So it should apply to others.
We invited George McDougal again.
Where's it going to be at, when?
It is going to be at 1 o'clock in this building, 7 to 7, in the chambers. It's
Here or upstairs?
here.
August sixth.
Seventh, Thursday, August 7th at 1.
Okay.
That's all I've
I think
got.
that does it. Nothing else, right? Okay, we'll stand adjourned.